With interviews including John Wooden, Michael Jordan, Walter Payton, and even Snoop Dogg, this 11-time New York Times best-selling author of 29 books has covered stories across the world from China to Iraq. He's also an award-winning motivational speaker and longtime writer and editor for Sports Illustrated. Please welcome into the huddle, Don Yaeger.
Dave, today on Huddle Up with Gus, we got a great guest, author, a coach. He speaks all over the place. I mean, his bio is tremendous. It's huge. He's been all over this world, and just like he said, he loves to tell stories about people he loves. So, and he makes a living doing it.
Nothing better than that.
Yeah. So today in the huddle with us is Don Yaeger. Don, thanks for being in the huddle with us, and we really appreciate you being on with us.
Awesome, Dave, Gus, appreciate it very much.
So, Don, we always start at the same spot. We want to know, when you were growing up in Hawaii, what was that influence? What was that spark for your love of sports? Was it your family members? Was it a coach? Somebody?
Well, I think the spark starts in your neighborhood, right? And I lived in a cul-de-sac, and we were the only Anglo family so I was the Howley, right, the white kid, a little bigger than some of the other kids at that stage, but my dad put a hoop up outside, and just football in the street, which were not very bright. We just did, the neighborhood, and kind of came out every day as soon as you could to play. And then it was my parents kind of had that every organized game you could play approach, right? If it's whatever season it was, I was expected to kind of be in the season and be doing it, which was cool. I mean, today, by 8 years old, kids are special, right? They've figured out that they're going to be this, and that's what they're going to be for forever, and so they stopped playing anything else. And in my house, that never ended. And so we were. I fell in love with sports, but I fell in love with the camaraderie of relationship that come from it, and so it just became a part of what made me feel. Hawaii is a unique place to grow up.
Yeah.
Because there is no majority, right? There's no, and so you look at all my school pictures as a kid, and I'm easy to pick out, right? I'm the little white kid in the middle with a bow tie on, but there'd be a couple of Koreans here, and a couple of Filipinos there, and a couple of Tongans there, and it was just so there was no. Community was important, but it was important in a slightly different way, because everyone had to find their spot, and for me, sports helped me find my spot.
What island did you grow up on?
So I was born on the Big Island of Hawaii in a little town called Hilo, and then I was raised on the main island of Oahu in a little town called Mauna Loa.
Well, that's great. My wife and I were married in Maui.
Yeah,
and,
Maui's where all the rich people like you went.
Yeah, we weren't rich. It was after my first year playing, and I did a Super Bowl party for the hotel, and they paid for 10 days of room and board. If I went to this party and got to talk to everybody, I'm like, yes. And then my buddy got us free airline tickets, so it all worked out pretty good.
That's John Freeze.
Freeze, quarterback. So we had a great time over there. There's no doubt.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is it's a unique environment, and again, the thing you don't appreciate when you're growing up there is how unique it is. And so, but it gave me this really amazing foundation where everyone had value. You don't see color because you can't. If you see color, you're an idiot, right?
Right.
And so you just really, it's funny because years later, so if you live there, and I know this wasn't where you're intending to go, but if you live there past a certain age, you earn a designation within the island as a kama'aina, which means you're a native Hawaiian. Does not matter your coloring or ethnic background. You're a native, right? And the Hawaii Tourism Bureau is constantly reaching back to the kama'ainas, seeking to get them to come back, for whatever.
Right.
And so when you go on their website, I'm coming back to Hawaii, they line up all kinds of things for you, and there's discounts and this and that. So my wife, who is half Filipino, right, and I show up the very first time we're there, and they look at her and they're like, "Welcome home." I'm going, no. Let's go with it. Let's go. That's right. This is her first visit, right? Don't give her credit because she's got some color in her skin, right? Get out of that.
Do you pull out your class photo and say, "No, this is me right here"?
No, I pull up my Social Security card, which shows them where, because the first 3 digits tell you where you were born. So anyway,
right. So did you do a lot of the water sports there as well, or did you not do that?
I did surf, but I wasn't exceptional. I would, but you did because everybody did. And the challenge, a couple of different times, you get caught in an undertow, and you're, an 8-year-old kid, and you're sure you've met your maker. It can be pretty hairy, and so you kind of, I had a few of those experiences, and but I was never. Sports for me was what happened in the street, in the backyard, and the driveway. Mostly.
Don, what brought your family to Hawaii to begin with? Were they in the military, or?
My dad was a preacher, a Methodist preacher, and so the church gave him an assignment there, and that's where. And so he pastored a church, and it was. We moved from there to Okinawa, Japan when I was 11. So I'd never even stepped foot in the continental United States. I was 13 when we moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, like Hawaii, Japan, Indianapolis. And I don't know if you have any listeners from Indianapolis, but that is not the path most people take, right? Usually people are going the other way. Let's get to Hawaii before it's over. So
right, yeah, that would be a hard, hey, you're going to go to Hawaii. Cool, I'll be in Hawaii. That'd be great. Love to raise my family there. All right, now we're going to move you to Japan. Another good island, just amazing things to do there, great food, everything. Now we're going to send you to Indianapolis.
Inner city, Indianapolis, Indiana. Yeah. So
is that why are you a Colts fan?
I actually, weirdly, I'm not a fan of any specific team. I have, through my work, I have friends on a lot of teams.
Yeah.
So mostly I root for my friends and try not to root because I find that if I'm spending too much time rooting for a team, I'm often rooting against a friend on another team. So I root for all my friends to do well and not get hurt. So you get that. That's a hard route on some Sundays.
Yes.
Well, Don, what was life like in Japan? And did you play sports in Japan? I know baseball is a big sport in that area.
So I played baseball in Japan.
Yeah.
That's what I did, and I was a catcher because again, little white guy, or I was the white guy, thicker than a lot of those kids I was playing against, and so I blocked the plate. Let me tell you. If you wanted to slide into home, you better be ready. And
it was legal at that point to do that.
It was legal at that point.
Right.
Exactly. It was pre-Pete Rose.
Yes.
But yeah, so I played, on my mom, who passed away a few years ago, I didn't realize had saved everything. You kind of think you move several times, all that stuff ultimately has got to be gone. And she actually had all my kids' sports pictures, all those other things in one bag, and it was fun. I'd forgotten I was on a bunch of those teams, which is bad, but it tells you how bad I was and how bad the team likely was. But it was again, parental influence was out the door and play, and growing up in Hawaii. My team was the San Francisco 49ers. They had a wide receiver named Golden Richards at the time. I'm a little older than I think both of you, but and we were all into he had played at the University of Hawaii, and all, so we were all like, it was pretty cool, and we were just into the 49ers. So I mean, first ever like Christmas gift that I can remember was a full set of pads and a helmet, and then I'd throw the ball to my little sister and go out and nail her. That didn't last long, and parents had to kind of tone that down. But yeah, it was you just find yourself loving everything about the game.
Yeah, no, that happened to my daughter as well. My two sons were playing football in the backyard, and my daughter goes, "Oh, I think I can play with them." She goes out, and my son Gunner just puts his shoulder into her and lays her out. She's crying. She comes in, "Dad, they're mean to me." I said, "You wanted to play with them. That's part of it." So, she never played football again with them.
Yeah,
but exactly. It's interesting that you were in Japan, and one of the things about it is that you talked about your neighborhood and your community. When you moved to Japan, then do you have the same kind of neighborhood and community that goes out and plays and I mean, it's a whole different area of the world. How was that for you?
Well, interestingly, my parents again kind of chose a home on a circle, right? And the circle was big enough that it would serve as our sports field. And so I just played with everybody. I mean, we all played different. One day it's baseball, the next day it's football, the next day it's we tried everything, and if somebody had it and it involved a ball, we did it, and that's just, again, it's funny. So I'm a late in life dad, and so I have an 11 and a 10, and my 11-year-old son, he's on the autism spectrum, so team sports are a little challenging for him.
Right.
But if he could do his entire life and basically never go outside because he loves what he can do on video games and things, I'm going, golly, you have no idea what you're missing. Like, you got to do this.
Right.
But I also get life is you push people to want to be comfortable, and a little outside of their comfort zone is good. Too far, and they can resent it. And so we're it's a difficult thing raising kids, right?
It really is. And the one thing I think that is missing when you don't go outside and play sports is that when you're with your friends and things and you get knocked down, you just get back up.
Right.
And you learn failures. You learn, get that kick in the stomach, and you get back up, and, you may be crying, but your buddies are there, and you just keep playing through that stuff. And I think that's one thing the kids miss today. It's not a mean thing. It's not like a organized sports thing where it's a coach saying get up and all this. It's in front of your buddies, and you got to learn to just have that will to get back up and go through that. Which when we all played sports when we were young, like, you just go through that. I've done it many, many times. And you play with older kids, younger kids, all different age groups.
Well, you learn to be able to manage situations too, because you don't have referees, and you have to work it out yourself, and you have to figure out what the strike zone is if you're playing wiffle ball or whatever. I mean, it takes some thinking that a lot of people are relying on. I think nowadays.
Dave has a wicked wiffle ball pitch, so we
does he really?
Yeah.
It's like a 12-6. It drops. My curveball drops about 8 feet. It's ridiculous. Gooden would be envious, I think.
Yeah, that's the only game we could play now is wiffle ball.
Yeah.
It's the safest one for us.
I know, but every once in a while you'll pull that muscle back here when you overswing. I know. I can imagine it. So.
Yeah. So then, when did you move to Indianapolis?
So coming into high school, I moved to Indianapolis, and so this is I know Gus, when you and I were talking kind of prep, and we were thinking about it, like, how does your youth and how does the sports and the other things that you've experienced influence you? So I moved to Indiana, and again, because I'd spent so much of my life in Hawaii and Japan, a lot of my American peers in Japan and my friends, even in Hawaii, were from military backgrounds, right? Military families.
Right.
And so I just envisioned myself being a military guy one day. I mean, everything kind of seemed to point me in that direction. So we're signing up for classes freshman year, Indianapolis. And so I signed up for ROTC. I'd go do the ROTC, learn what it means to become an officer, lead people, become successful. And the night before class started, the counselor called the house and said, hey, not enough kids signed up, so we canceled our OTC. But don't worry, we put you on the student newspaper because, there was a slot there, and, and a freshman, they could put you there. And I liked writing. I don't think I had any appreciation that it would become a career, but that random moment in time when something I envisioned wasn't available, something, somebody filling a slot put me in a place. I literally found my passion within weeks. Like, I realized how much I enjoyed asking questions, learning things that other people weren't learning, were not learning, and then crafting it in a way that other people could consume it. And for all the career planning you could try and all the other things that sometimes people are busy, taking tests to define, what am I best at? My career in its own way began on the small stepping stones of because a class was not there weren't enough kids that wanted to be an ROTC. Otherwise, right. I might today be a colonel in the United States Army. Who knows? But anyway.
Yeah, that's what this is all about. You find your passion at different ages. Dr. Hamitsky last night, she was telling us about how she really didn't understand and find her passion until she went and did her psych rotation at Western Psych here in Pittsburgh. And she got a mentor that she absolutely thought was brilliant and saw how she changed people's lives. And she said, that's exactly what I want to do. And there she was 26 years old. So we all have a different time when that passion comes to us. But the point of it is that once you find it, you take hold of it and you really push forward.
Yeah.
So it probably wasn't long. I mean, if you were a freshman writing for the school paper, at what point you probably became editor as a sophomore? You were a rising star probably in that, right?
Actually, it's funny. I had a newspaper advisor, and all these silly, funny things, but newspaper advisor who would ultimately tell me that she didn't think I was cut out for it, and didn't let me become all of those things.
Oh.
And so, ironically, a few years later, through a series of crazy circumstances, I became the youngest ever nominee for the Pulitzer Prize. Right?
Wow.
And pretty soon I got this little package from my high school, and it was this advisor who had now inducted me, whatever the word is, as if you died, right? Posthumously. I can never say that word. I should learn not to try words I can't say on a podcast.
That happens to me all the time. So.
But she had decided that now I was worthy of their induction in their little journalism society that they had for our high school, and I thought it was really funny. When I left, I was neither in that society nor was I. Did she think she thought I was okay, but not like this guy's not going to go find himself at any level. And then at 19, I'm in this crazy place, and this package arrives. I'm going, really? Honestly, now you want me in your club? I'm okay. I can live without your club at this stage.
Yeah.
Now, what was it that you wrote that earned you that honor?
So I was then at Ball State University, right? One of America's finest, one of Muncie, Indiana's finest institutions. And while there, I had done a series of stories about how the university was investing its money, and what I discovered was that the university was taking public dollars, millions and millions of public dollars, and at below market value, investing it in banks that the president of the university and the chairman of the board of trustees had outsized investments in. So the president and the university trustees were making money off of the university's public money, and the grand jury was impaneled, and a couple of folks were indicted, and the president lost his job, and all this crazy stuff because this little college kid decided to look at how they were investing their money, which was crazy. So,
and did that start a lot of? Did you know how to investigate then, or did you just kind of?
I just, again, I think my whole deal was I've always known how to. I've always loved asking questions and then following, following threads. Right? If you ask a question, and one of the things that drives me crazy when I'm listening to interviews or doing things is if somebody says something that leads to a really obvious, you should ask that next question, right? Give me just a little deeper so I understand that person. But they've got a card with their 8 questions they're supposed to ask in this podcast, and so they're on to the next question. Anyway, long way of saying I don't know that I ever really figured out how to be a great investigator. What I was just somebody. I had a high. I've heard this phrase recently with a couple of executives I work with. A CQ, a high curiosity quotient, right?
Right.
I didn't have a high IQ, evidenced by the fact that I was at Ball State. I didn't have a high EQ, evidenced by the fact that I was a journalist, right? And they're all weird. So a high CQ worked for me, right? And curiosity became my thing.
Well, as Lee Steinberg said, you have to be a good listener. In all his negotiations, it's about listening, having a quiet mind, and understanding what that coach, that GM, that owner wants, and trying to figure out how to get there. And I'm assuming when you have a high CQ, you kind of go about that the same way.
Yeah, you're asking questions. Sometimes you're listening for answers they're not really giving you, right? And maybe the answer is apparent, but you don't want to assume it. So ask the question. And sometimes some of the stories. I had a chance a few years ago to write a book with a running back. You probably remember him, Warwick Dunn,
yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Warwick played in Tampa and Atlanta, but he was, an 18-year-old high school senior when his mother, who was a police officer, was shot and killed in a robbery at a bank. And he's 18. He's no father. He raises his 5 younger brothers and sisters, goes to become a first-round pick in the NFL, starts a charity buying homes for women like his mom. Crazy. The guy is so incredible. Been interviewed 10,000 times about all the amazing things he's done. But one day he and I were just talking, and the CQ curiosity question for me was, if that guy that killed your mom were to sit and there were to be 3 of us in a room today, what kind of questions would you ask him? Like, what would you want to know about him?
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah. And ultimately, as we began that conversation about what he'd want to learn from the guy that killed his mom, we discovered we could actually go to Louisiana and sit on death row with the guy, and we did.
Wow.
We went there and we spent an hour on death row, in which Warwick got to go eye to eye with the guy that killed his mom. Right? Like, that's just an incredible moment that doesn't. But it kind of grew from a question that's a weird question to ask somebody, right? Like, what would you say if you could look in the eye of the guy that killed your mom? And so that willingness to be a little more curious about stories and maybe ask a question that, for all the years of interviews, some people might not have answered, has served me professionally pretty well.
Now, upon graduation at Ball State, I'm sure there wasn't a shortage of job offers after just what we've heard. What was your first big job? What did you, what was your next opportunity that you took?
Yeah, I actually went to San Antonio, Texas to work for the big newspaper in San Antonio, which was a pretty incredible opportunity right out of college. Most people in my profession, you had to go to work at the Weewa Times and all those other things. And I got this really cool chance, and I'd interned there the year before, and it was a mixture of sports and news, which was cool that I did both.
Yeah.
Even at a big newspaper, I got a chance to do both. And so I got to play out my passion. But most sports journalism isn't fueled by high C. This is going to sound really horrible to all my peers. Hopefully I don't get crucified here. Most sports journalism isn't fueled by high CQ people, right?
Right.
They want to know, what were you feeling, or there's the 7 questions you have to ask somebody after a game, after a moment, whatever. And so I was kind of finding my space into the mixture of those two places in journalism. Went from San Antonio to Dallas Morning News, and was the youngest reporter on their staff at the time, and then went down to a smaller paper to have more responsibility in Florida, and then got picked up at Sports Illustrated, which there's only 30 writers for Sports Illustrated in the whole world, so it was a pretty cool time and a pretty cool. My peers are the most talented people I ever had a chance to work with, and every day was an opportunity to learn from them.
Yeah, so if you have a high CQ, to me it's like, all right, I just played this game. I know what I did right and wrong. Okay, I threw 3 interceptions. We lost the game. So when a reporter comes in and they said, well, how did you feel about your game? It's when you have a high CQ as a reporter, you're going to ask a better question that's going to lead to a better answer. Absolutely. And I think that's what you're getting at.
Right. How did you feel? How do you think I felt?
Right, exactly.
Just with 3 interceptions and we lost the game. What you really want to ask is, where you'd want to go might be something about, Gus, you've played your entire life and had 3 games before where you've ever done this, right? Is there something you think about either your preparation or maybe your the way you were feeling walking on the field, or is there something they were doing? Where can you help me understand how do you process what happened today in that sense, right?
Right.
It's not just that you threw 3 interceptions. Maybe there was maybe in that process you'll share with me that that morning your daughter had woke up really sick, and when you got to the field you didn't want to play, but you realized your backup was limping, and you know what, your mind wasn't, and you're not making an excuse, but somewhere in here, if I get you to engage my curiosity and appreciate my curiosity, you're going to give me a better answer.
Well, I also feel like that a lot of times the human side is missed in reporting as for athletes, right? It's just about what happened to you in the 3 hours that you played that game. Well, you don't understand what happened. That's happened to me, where the week before, the coach and I has been in arguments, and we haven't gotten along, and it was a really stressful situation. Now, if you went into somebody's regular work day and asked them about why they're stressed out, it may be traffic or whatever. Well, athletes go through all that stuff too and have good and bad days. Right. It's just ours are magnified.
Absolutely, because yours get to be watched by millions of folks. So it's about trying to find non-simple answers to find root causes to things that might. Gosh, did a book with Michael Orr, the kid from The Blind Side, right?
Yeah.
And as he and I are making our way through all the homes he lived in and all the different places he grew up, and he talked about running from this woman from the Department of Children and Families who kept trying to who realized how bad their mother was and wanted to put them in foster homes, right? And they all thought she was the devil, like the devil incarnate. Now, as a grown man, he appreciates that she had a job and was really looking after their best interest because she saw what they couldn't see as children. And so then the question was, gosh, if you could find her, like, what would you say? How would you handle a moment with like a lunch with her?
Right.
And he's like, oh man. And next thing you know, I spent 4 days, find her.
Right.
She was in her last year. She was ready to retire. And Michael Orr is walking in to take her to lunch to say thank you. It's like the coolest thing ever.
That is
right?
really, that's great.
Changed her, changed him, made the book better. I mean, every bit of it happens because you're trying to figure things out that could have been like, I could have let him just talk about her as the devil, and it would have been good content for a book.
Yeah.
Or you go just a little deeper.
Yeah.
And all of that really kind of comes from, I think, growing up around, my dad was a preacher, right? So he was constantly trying to explore how to get through to people. And so anyway.
Don, at a place like Sports Illustrated, how are the writing assignments divvied up? Like, how does that work? Because there's only, like you said, there's maybe 30 writers, and there's a world of topics. And how does that work?
Yeah. So there's a handful of beat people, right? I mean, Peter King, right, would have been probably the guy that you might have seen most often. Legend. I mean, the best NFL writer ever worked around. He had everybody in his phone, right? There wasn't anybody that if he wanted to, Peter King, Tim Layden in baseball, Tim Layden in college football, Tom Bertucci, Phil Taylor in the NBA. Every one of them, there's a handful who had like beats, and then there was the rest of us, right? And the rest of us just kind of, sometimes the story would become apparent either through a beat writer that needed somebody that's not on the beat to tell it, because you might ruffle a few feathers, and it's easier for
Right.
Peter King to go, oh, that Don Yaeger guy, what a pain in the butt that guy is, right? And then keep all of his sources happy. And sometimes it was just that it just worked better to have somebody. And then sometimes there were crazy stories that came my way because people I might have been interviewing or other things and just your mind is constantly thinking, what's the story they're not going to get in any other medium, and how can I uniquely tell it? And if you're trying to constantly think that way, you find yourself in the middle of really cool opportunities. Heck, sitting in southern China with Chinese mobsters who are counterfeiting U.S. golf clubs because they figured out that they can make more money selling counterfeit golf clubs than trying to smuggle drugs in the United States. It's one of these mobster guys said to me, until they develop, golf club sniffing dogs, we have a market, right?
Right.
And so they're shipping, grips and heads and everything else, and putting them together in the United States, and you're buying them on eBay, thinking, what a deal! And the truth is, it's all counterfeit. And it was fascinating to kind of find yourself in the middle of stories that would, in most other environments, never get told.
How do you gain access to Chinese mobsters doing that? Like, what's the process in that?
It's slow, right? You literally kind of we found ourselves in China for a bit, making relationships with people who were doing certain things, who then would grow to trust you a little bit. Next thing you know, you're just, as in anything in life, right? You're slowly, if you try to go too aggressively or too quickly, A, you probably don't get the story, and B, bad things could happen, right? So you keep working.
Did you ever have a fear of something bad that could happen to you?
Yeah, a few times. I mean, I went to Iraq when a year after we invaded Iraq. So think about how many years ago that was, right? As Saddam Hussein, I had done a piece about Saddam Hussein's son, Uday, who was the chairman of the Iraqi Olympic Committee. And when he was in power, the basement of the Iraqi Olympic Committee building was a 31-cell torture chamber. where if he sent you to the Olympics and said, by the way, Dave, looking at you, buddy, I think you're the third best shot putter in Asia. And when you go to the Asian Championships, don't come back finishing any worse than third, right? And if you came back with a fourth, you go to the torture chamber. And that was his model of leadership, right? That was the way to inspire the best. And to do that story, I went to several countries and tracked down Iraqi athletes who had escaped. And they showed me their scars and they told me their stories. And so a year later, U.S. had invaded Iraq, and Saddam was dead. The sons were dead, and Saddam had been captured but not yet killed. But the sons were dead, and I was in, because that was the first year, 2004, that a free Iraqi team was going to go to the Olympics. And I was there to travel with them as they were preparing to go participate in an Olympics without threat of torture. And, but you're in Iraq and there's roadside bombs going off. And, though I was in a compound, there was rockets being shot by insurgents over the walls into the compound. I mean, it's just, there were moments where you found yourself thinking, this is for a sports story, right?
Yeah. That's exactly what I was just going to ask you.
But at the end of the day, it was compelling and interesting, and all things I did before I had children.
Right. So when was the first time you wrote a book? Like you go to San Antonio. What was the first book you wrote, and when was that?
So the first book I wrote, I was working for the newspaper here in Florida and I had done I had arranged a little bit of opportunity that I covered politics for the newspaper, but half of every year I would take off to tackle some crazy assignment, try something new. In one of those half years, I went to Afghanistan and traveled with the Mujahideen when they were fighting the Soviets. Again, I know, sounds crazy. In one of those half years, I traveled and looked at the best schools in America to find out what they had in common, right? And one of those half years, I took off and investigated the NCAA like they investigate universities. Like, I want to understand what was their process, who were the people that were behind their investigations, what were their activities like, how did they spend their money, and so anytime you investigate the investigators, you generally find a pretty good. There's always an audience for it, because all the people who hate the NCAA were going to read it, right? And B, there are a lot of people who didn't know if they'd hate the NCAA that might be interested in what you're writing, and that series of stories for the newspaper got ultimately opened up my first ever book deal, and company paid me $5,000 to write a book, and I thought I was rolling in it, cash it, put it all down on the floor in ones and let me roll. But it was my first opportunity, and it really kind of taught me that I didn't fully appreciate how much harder it is to go long form and to maintain people's attention for 280 pages. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
And there are very few stories worthy of that. And so, which I know sounds weird, because you walk into a bookstore and you're going, God, this is crazy.
Right.
But for every book that's published, there are 50 that get turned down. So it's a really neat process. And now this fall, book number 29 comes out for me, which is crazy.
Wow. What was the first book again?
So it was called Undue Process: The NCAA's Injustice for All. Yeah, the title kind of tells you where I stood on the issue.
Right.
How did they like being investigated? They're usually the ones investigating.
I still don't get an invitation to go to the Final Four. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Right? And that was 25 years ago, right? I mean, there's still people there. I think I'm still on dartboards there, which is cool. Yeah, that's good.
So you wrote your first book. You're still working at a newspaper. You're doing sports and news.
Yep.
and major stories that are happening in our country.
Right.
That seems pretty interesting. Most people are just in one or the other. You seem
Right.
to kind of combine both.
It's because I love politics. I mean, I live today in Tallahassee, Florida, in part because I love politics, and I look at politics and sports in a lot of the same ways, right? There's a winner and a loser at the end of everything. Strategy is incredibly important. Creating culture is really dynamic, and then more and more these days, it's all full contact. So basically, It's the same thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So my passions have always kind of run in both directions. So I've always done everything I can to keep my fingers in both pies.
How do you feel about the athletes becoming more involved in politics now?
So look, I mean, I think part of what makes America great is the ability for all. I mean, what are men and women dying on battlefields for, right? It's for a freedom of expression. It's for an ability to agree and disagree, right? The key to all of it, in my opinion, is can we do it more respectfully of each other? And I think, unfortunately, at every extreme, it's not as respectful as it once was. I think people are looking for, and in some ways, the best way to show nothing can be just done, right? It has to be done and amplified. Right. And the best way to amplify things sometimes is to try to create almost showman-like efforts around it. And instead of just disagreeing, let's or even seeking compromise, let's try to do what we can to make everybody, in some ways, even criticize the other side. And I'm all for athletes having and using a platform just as much as any other profession, writers, but what I struggle with is disrespectful use of the platform, right. and I see that far too often these days.
Have you spent time on a campaign trail as a journalist?
I did. Yeah, I've done well. Not lately, but yes, I did. And I covered 3 presidential elections, where one of which I actually traveled with every candidate from both parties. Like they were in the primary, which was a lot of fun because you get a chance to.
So you know Iowa very well.
I do know Iowa very well. Yes, I've been to many a county fair there, baby. I've eaten a lot of fried butter or whatever the hell.
Fried butter, fried Snickers, fried Oreos, you name it, they fry it.
What election year was that?
So the first one I did was 88. And I did 92 and 96. So yeah, and it was
enough, right? You said
that was enough.
Let me go back to sports writing and get away from the politics.
Yeah. So
then you're on your 29th book now, which is amazing. How long does it usually take you to write a book? Like, has it been a big variable, or is it pretty similar year or so?
It's about a year. But some come together more quickly because of the events, that precipitated the book, like say, do it fast, right? I mean, be as deep as you can. When the Duke lacrosse, scandal occurred, I was engaged, and the deal was, hey, how quickly can you get in there, get people to trust you, get people to tell you their stories, and turn something around. So, but there was a one little 5-year window. So I maybe one of the most impactful books I had the chance was, you remember Walter Payton? Yes. Obviously, Walter was dying, and he wanted a writer to live with him so he could tell his story, and he hired me to live with him. And so I lived with Walter for the last 10 weeks of his life.
Wow.
was there the morning he died, and just it was this. Um, it impacted me in a great way because my I he was my hero, right? Growing up, like he was the guy that I mean, and then to like be invited in, he was 46, right, when he died, and so I actually couldn't see myself doing that, throwing myself that deeply into another human again for a while.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do a book for several years, and then I got a phone call from representatives of Tim McGraw, the country music singer, and his dad was dying also. His dad was dying of a brain tumor. And in their kind of decisions about what to do in this, they reached out to some other folks, including Connie Payton, and one of the things that came up was that in some way having this writer in their kind of midst had been helpful in conversation. And so I got the opportunity to work with Tim and his father. It was so back-to-back books. Like I was brought in to work with people who already knew they were passing when I got engaged, and two really, really impactful opportunities.
Did you encounter some resistance from some of the family members because of the privacy issues, or were you pretty welcome?
I think you always encounter issues at the beginning. And then if people grow to understand your heart and realize that, I'm only here because someone's asked me to be, I will be as respectful as I can, understanding the circumstances and bringing empathy to everything I do. And and ultimately in both cases, I still stay very, very close with Connie and Brittany and Jarrett, Walter's two children. I still stay, for a while I served on Tim and Tug's charity board after Tug passed. I stay close. You grow after a while. I think if they see your heart right, they realize you're there because you care, not just because you're going to profit from it.
Right.
And then relationships blossom that are pretty cool.
And I assume that your CQ takes a while there too, because you don't want to, overstep your bounds, and then you have to kind of build that relationship before you really want to pull that thread and ask some of those questions.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the heart of CQ, right? Is knowing when to ask the curious question. If you ask it too early, it's not a good question. Even if it could be the best question in the world, asked at the wrong time, and it takes you nowhere. So,
but it's just amazing to me that nobody was going to walk into Walter Payton in a week and say, ask any of the questions that you probably were able to ask him, because 10 weeks of spending that time, it just proved to them that we will tell him anything. And for you to spend 10 weeks, that's amazing. That's like true, to me, journalism, reporting, and understanding of what it means to tell the story.
Yeah. And it's an honor. I mean, Brittany Payton just was asked recently was asked a question about the book and about the experience, and she said, gosh, it's coming up on 20 years since her dad died in this November. And she said, Don just became part of our family. And I thought that's like
right.
Chokes you up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
No, I agree. So you just wrote a recent book that you sent us about Joe. So how was that? Joe is just this bigger than life figure. That had to be like a totally different way to look at it. And I'm really interested to see how your brain was working with Joe.
Did you know him previous to this?
I did not. I had a mutual friend introduced us, and so the crazy part was, Joe though he hasn't run from the limelight, kind of after the Susie Colbert incident on the sideline of ESPN, didn't seek it like he used to, and so but he also went into rehab and went and hasn't touched a drop of alcohol since that night. So but his story of healing himself from, he's worked on the concussion front, with he's doing some incredible things with hyperbaric treatment, and what it has done for him. I mean, I've seen the brain scans, what it's done for him. His belief in that model of treatment. So really what happened was I started talking to Joe, had dinner with him a couple times, and his agent and some other people, and kind of proposed an idea around, he's iconic, but he had to at some stage heal himself. And the truth is, all of us have to do that at some stage, right? All of us go through something in life where we have to heal ourselves. Most of us don't do it on a stage like his, or with a backdrop like his. And I mean, you imagine sitting in an AA meeting with Joe Namath, right? So it was really, he's just an amazing human, and the opportunity to get a chance to not tell the story of flash and flamboyance, which is there because you have to, right? But tell the story of his journey to heal himself is really what makes the story special, and it's what makes me feel as I do about Joe.
Right.
Because that's a hard thing, easy thing to do. Say, man, I am awesome. Like, I am so awesome. Everybody should continue to remember I'm awesome. And if you don't remember, let me tell you, I'm awesome.
Right.
Instead, Joe is like, man, I'm troubled. And how do I find my way? And his journey is really pretty cool.
Yeah, I heard him on Howard Stern in that interview, which was great. And he talked about how he went from drinking alcohol, his new vice is eating ice cream. And he lost weight eating ice cream. It's like, oh, that's the only person I've ever heard of losing weight eating ice cream, because the alcohol.
Well, that tells you how much alcohol he was drinking, right there.
Yeah, and what was great was, Howard Stern is going to ask the questions. He probably has a CQ like yours, right? He's going to ask those questions that are hitting at the right time. And Joe was not afraid. Joe spoke the truth, and which was great. And I love to hear it.
Well, but that's the cool part, right? I mean, about being 75 when we're working on it, or coming up on 75, is that he's hit that place in his life where he can say what he needs to say and do it authentically, and not worry about you sitting in judgment of him, because he's Joe Namath.
Right. So you've had all these bestsellers. You've written many, many books. Out of all of your books, where do you rank them? Like, hey, this is the one that I could go back and read again and again.
If you're on an island and you need to take one of your books,
you're back in Hawaii, you're going to give it to little Don and say, hey, I want you to read this book. This is a great book.
So first off, do you have multiple children?
Yes.
Okay. So if you were on an island, you had to pick one, you would do what?
I don't know.
Well,
our daughter always says that Gunner is her favorite, but then it goes to Gabe. Yeah. I don't know. But I understand what you're saying.
By the way, I'm really glad to know you're like the first father I've ever met who had the guts to actually to start naming them in order. And I hope your children don't watch this anytime.
Oh, they know we mess with them all the time. So they're actually good people.
So it's tough to do that, but I would tell you, because I'd always. I mean, I had someone who I respect greatly, an author friend of mine, who said my favorite book is the one I'm working on today, which is
right.
It's cheesy, right? But it better be, because if it's not, you're in trouble, because you got to believe that every time you're trying to find something new and get better. But I had an opportunity a number of years ago to work with John Wooden.
Yeah.
Where for every other month for 12 years I flew to California for a day with John Wooden. And just to learn from him, and my responsibility was to come prepared with questions to learn. It was not a writing assignment. It was not it was pure, straight up opportunity to learn. And I'm kind of riven by that. I love learning. And so Coach Wooden gave me that chance, and ultimately we wrote a book together. It came out on his 99th birthday. His last book written by John Wooden before he died, about mentoring. And so to me, if I had to hand my son a book and say, here's if I could have you read one book, it's a book in which John Wooden explores the mentors of his life, right? The people who shaped who he would become, and then the seven people whose lives he changed by mentoring them. And the eighth, unsaid in the book, is me, right?
Right.
And so it was kind of a cool thing to be able to kind of show the power of what mentoring means when we do it right.
And you mentor now, right? You go into companies and you help mentor executives and help them understand what it means to have leadership and to be a leader, because I think a lot of executives don't really understand what that means.
Yeah, no, and it's a big that is a big deal to do that, and so it's kind of an exciting part of what I think they're walking in the back of the room there, and then I do a lot of coaching and mentoring even today.
Well, that is great.
Probably use a lot of the stuff you learned from Coach Wooden in those talks.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah.
in every one of them. If you want to be coached or mentored by me, you better be ready to listen to a few John Woodenisms. Yeah.
Right. No, that's great. So we're definitely going to have to read that book, Dave, because we have to really bring this show to the next level.
Increase our CQ.
Yes, definitely. So, Don, before we go, we do one last little segment. It's called the No Huddle, and it's a 2-minute drill. And we ask you some questions. You give us quick answers, long answers, doesn't matter. But we really like to go through these and ask kind of some more fun stuff. So
okay.
Dave always starts off. So, Dave, why don't you start?
Okay, Don, if you could trade places with anyone in history for a day, who would that be?
Anyone in history for a day, whoever served as assistant to Mother Teresa. Like, I would be fascinated how anybody can have the heart to do what she did every day in those conditions.
That's great. It's a really good answer. All right, so what is your biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve is, oh my gosh, people who drive slow in the fast lane.
I hate that.
Gussel, I know, I hear about that.
I hate that too. That's the worst.
Or secondarily, people who were getting off an airplane and decide at the top of the walkway, but before they've exited into the terminal, to stop and check their phone or do something. Come on, man! Like, be aware that there's a whole line of us trying to get past you. And I know that's important, whatever you're doing, but that Facebook post will be there when you get off. When you take 8 more steps, go.
Yeah, we just want to get off this tin can. Let us out.
If you could go back in time and tell a young Don Yaeger one thing, what would that be?
Be more patient. I was always in a hurry. Like, I wanted the next big job, the next big title, the next big assignment at every juncture, and it probably it served me poorly in portions of my career. That today it took me until recently to fully appreciate. I've literally called editors in the last couple of years, with whom I had falling outs many years ago, to just say, hey, I've recognized and I apologize.
Right. No, that is wonderful. I've done that with a few coaches, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So you've been a sports writer. You've been to many sporting events. What is your favorite sports venue that you've ever been to?
The Kentucky Derby. It's the greatest people watching. Like, if you're able to just, enjoy the sporting, but again, the best part is the sports is like 2 minutes, right?
Right.
And then there's all the time in between those 2 minutes, and just enjoy the people watching. And I love to look at folks and ask what they saw in the mirror that morning.
That's pretty good. I love doing that at airports.
A lot of hats, yes.
Like when you go to a busy airport and just And you're looking at all the different people. You're like, this world is made up of like, there's not one person that looked the same in this whole airport. And I'm sure the Kentucky Derby is a lot.
I just got back from the beach, and I was asking that too. Some of the stuff you see on the beach. Wow. What about the most overhyped thing in sports today?
Most overhyped thing in sports today. I think it's the culture we've created that everything has to be analyzed immediately. It's the sense that the second a trade is announced, a winner and loser has to also be announced, right? We've never seen either of these players now play with their new franchises. They could be amazing, and you have no idea. I mean, but why everything has to be immediately analyzed is, to me, maybe that may not answer your question, but it's one of those things that drives me crazy. Why we have that need for immediate assessment of everything is crazy to me.
All right, Don, if we were going through your cell phone and we said we had to find the most famous person in your cell phone, who would that be?
Oh, gosh. Shaq, maybe? Snoop Dogg? I don't know.
If you said you could call either one of them right now and they'd say, hey, Don, what's up?
Shaq.
All right.
Yeah.
Don, you've written a series of books with Brian Kilmeade.
Yeah.
Can you tell us one thing that we may not know about Brian Kilmeade that might surprise the general public?
He is the most self-deprecating human being I've ever worked with. Like, I love his ability to laugh at himself, and that's pretty fun. Like, I mean, that's a trait I love in people, and it's what attracted me to him.
That's an important quality that a
yeah,
lot of people don't have.
He shows a video every once in a while when he's speaking to people in which, it's a young Brian Kilmeade, and he's somewhere, and whoever it is that's in the studio says, and we have Brian Kincaid down there at the, but like totally calls him by like the wrong name multiple times.
Right.
As he's trying to, and so, Brian Kilmeade signing off right at the end, but he's just like trying to make sure the guy back there gets it. And yeah, anyway.
You have to have a little bit of that. They spelled my name wrong in my Pro Bowl jersey. So, it's like, everybody's like, why didn't you get it changed? I'm like, it's the day of the game. I see my jersey. It has my name spelled wrong. What am I going to do? I can't, we're in Hawaii. They're not shipping it back. So you do have to laugh to yourself and have a great sense of humor. But, I hope we kind of gave you an idea, a different kind of interview, and I hope you had fun today on Huddle Up, and thank you for being in the huddle with us.
I did. Thank you very much for inviting me in.